Hey guys, and welcome to today's video where I wanted to go through some of my old setups. So as you know, I review a lot of your guys' setups. Lately I've been talking about doing bioactive setups, and I thought it'd be interesting to sort of go through some of my old setups, look at what I did, what I liked, what I didn't like, and just see how much things have changed in my 13 years of owning leopard geckos. So the first setup we're going to look at is my first ever attempt at a setup back in 2006 when I first got Gizmo. So I only really have this footage of it, but I do have some footage from a few years later when I'm cleaning out her tank, and it's pretty much the same setup, so we may refer to that as well. But basically, this vivarium of gizmos, it was bought second hand. It was £30. It came with a lock, some fake plants, some food, which was literally dried flies, and yeah, I threw that out straight away. And at the bottom of the vivarium were just bits of calci sand, so I can only imagine what the previous gecko had to deal with. And what's worse is when we bought the vivarium, I remember my dad asking the lady about the gecko that must have lived in it, and she said she was happy they didn't have it anymore. So, lovely lady. But basically what I wanted to say about this is it being second hand and all. Obviously at the time I was about 13, and I totally understand when you're that age, you know, of course you need to save money for food and potentially for, like, if you have to go to vets and so on and so forth, but sometimes setting up, there are cheaper ways of doing it, and second hand can totally work because a lot of things can be in decent condition, but people don't need them anymore, they want to get rid of them, and you can save a lot of money. Just make sure you thoroughly disinfect anything you do get second hand before you use it with your reptile. Anyway, this setup consisted of eco-earth, 3 hides, a water bowl, calcium and some fake plants. For a first time tank, I don't think it's bad at all. I was very fortunate that the breeder I bought Gizmo from told me to avoid calci sand at all costs. She actually kept all of her geckos on eco-earth and the babies, and I think that's probably why I went down that route. But interestingly enough, I did originally look at leopard geckos at a reptile shop. I decided to go against that, that's why I ended up finding a breeder, but a family friend decided he wanted a leopard gecko after I got mine, went to this reptile shop, followed their instructions, used calci sand, and that gecko died within a year. And it's actually quite incredible when you think about it that good advice at the start of owning an animal can literally sometimes be the difference between life and death. I warned him against the calci sand, he still used it, it's still being sold today, and it literally just killed this gecko within a few months of its life. Anyway, moving on. The next setup we'll look at is Ziggy's first setup. So when Ziggy came to me, I believe she was 3 weeks old. If you're a first time owner, I would suggest maybe getting a gecko that's more like 2 or 3 months old. I find it weird when breeders will sell babies at expos for like literally a few weeks old. I just feel like you want to ensure they're healthy, they're growing and things are going well with them. However, at the time, because I'd had about 6 years experience with geckos, the breeder was literally just round the road from me. He sold her to me at 3 weeks old. He said if there are any problems, let me know, but she was perfectly fine. She grew well and she is my biggest female now. Anyway, she was basically fresh out the eggs, so I wanted to do a really simple setup for her. It's super simple. Like, I wanted to be able to clean everything well, allow her to get around easily. I didn't want it to be too cluttered. I don't necessarily think you have to do this as a baby. I think you can add more things, more places for them to hide. This cricket box, for example, I actually ended up covering it up because it let in too much light. She needed a place to hide that was dark. Would I do this again for a simple setup? Probably not. I would probably incorporate a lot more different things for her to hide in. She didn't actually stay in this kind of setup for too long. I did end up getting her some hides, and then I got her eco-earth when she was about 2 months old. So this is her setup with the eco-earth as well as her upgraded hides. Her cold hide kind of doubled up as a moist hide. You'll probably see this in a lot of my setups, basically. Like, you can tell when your gecko's about to shed, so I mist down like a hide for them that they used a lot, and the shed would just come off. This whole setup is in what's known as a faunarium. I think faunariums can be fine for baby geckos. Like, Ziggy was so tiny here. When I first got her, she was the size of my thumb, and I have very small hands. However, I did have Diego in one for about a year of his life, and Minnie actually lived in one for a few years. Now, Minnie is one of my smaller geckos, and so it wasn't too bad for her. However, looking back, if I were to do it again, I would just get them vivariums. I wouldn't keep an adult leopard gecko in a faunarium. I think it can be great for a temporary tank, like if you suddenly have to separate geckos because they shouldn't be living together anyway. If you need to clean out your geckos, you need somewhere to put them. Faunariums can be very helpful. However, as a permanent house, I'm glad that I finally upgraded them to vivariums. So it was quite soon into my channel that I actually ended up getting vivariums for them. Diego sort of outgrew his faunarium, and I wanted to get them vivariums. So this footage is from my Viv Exotic vivarium review, so that's why I'm messing with the doors a lot, but this is the best I could find of my setups without backgrounds, because that will get into it in a bit. This is quite a simple setup. We got a bit of a fake plant, 2 hides. The cave hide, the Exoterra, I really like those hides, so if you're looking for a decent hide, that is one that I actually really like. Anyway, as I mentioned, I did end up adding backgrounds. I remember this time distinctly because I was like, right, I'm going to order everyone a different background each. I want to incorporate slate in the tank because that seemed to be a really popular thing. A lot of people saying like you could put slate over the heat mat and it'd be really good. That never worked for me. I don't know if the heat mats weren't powerful enough, but the heat did not come through on the slate, so I avoided that, but I did incorporate slate in the tank as well as Eco Earth. But a lot of their tanks not only had the slate in, but they had a lot of aquarium hides. So they like were all getting these new hides. So Diego's tank here, you can see that on the right hand side, that hide is technically a fish hide. I actually got that one secondhand, but he loves that one. He still actually technically has that in his tank to this day. The one on the left was a fish cave that looked bigger in pictures, and then I got it, and although he did technically fit in there, it just didn't look right, and I don't think he used it that much, so I wouldn't recommend that one. Then we have Gizmo's setup, and as you can see, it's got a background and everything. I do think backgrounds can make a massive difference, and even a little 2D one that you get for like fish tanks and stuff, they're not overly expensive and they can have quite an impact. But basically, she had these 2 hides in here. Once again, as I said, when I could see they were going to shed, I usually missed it. The hide over a heat mat was her original hide from when she was a baby, and the one in the corner was an aquarium hide once again. But this one she did use, but not in the traditional sense, so she didn't lay underneath it, but she would lay in it. So the hide was actually hollow and she would get up in the rocks, and one time I actually thought I'd lost her, but no, she was hiding. Then we have Ziggy's setup, which is very similar to before but with a background, and we've got a little bit of slate going on in there. And then Minnie's setup, looking back, looks very bland, but I think I did this because her sight is always a little bit dodgy, and I thought if it's very simple, lots of space to move around, it might be easier for her. But actually, to me, it looks a little bit boring. But there was a reason she had this type of cave over a heat mat. When she had a log hide with like 2 open ends, crickets could run straight through and she'd have trouble catching them. Whereas when she had this cave, not only did the crickets run in the cave because they're dark, but then they'd kind of get trapped in there, and so it was easier for her to actually catch them. She also had a cave over in the corner, which was this like fossil aquarium cave. It wasn't too expensive. I remember I bought 2 at the time. I never used the second one, but it was a really good cave and she used hers a lot. Interestingly, when I was collecting footage for this video and I was looking around the time where I had like my decorative backgrounds and aquarium hides, I suddenly remembered when I saw these videos that I used to make hides from styrofoam, grout, paint and sealant, and at one point I made Minnie a Disney Tangled inspired medieval house. Yeah. I put it in her tank and then I realised it was far too big for her tank, and I think I took it out, left it in the conservatory, someone put it out on the patio and it rained and destroyed the entire house. So obviously the sealant wasn't great on it, but there's actually an entire tutorial if you want to see how to make that. I really actually enjoyed that house, But yeah, that was just a weird part of my YouTube sort of history. Anyway, from tanks with decorative backgrounds, aquarium hides and eco-earth, I then moved on to 3D backgrounds with real and fake hides and earth mix arid. These are more naturalistic, it's what I've got to this day. I wanted to go for the 3D backgrounds because I wanted there to be more room to explore, and every single one of my geckos will climb up their backgrounds, so definitely worth it. They aren't the cheapest to get, the 3D backgrounds, but I'm very happy that I did do that. Obviously, I have said I'm going to be changing Diego to a bioactive tank, so that's the next step, that's the next challenge for me. I do feel like the more research I do, the more things that come to light about these animals and how they live in the wild, that'll be reflected in my setups. I haven't really talked much about like tech in this video, but obviously I added in UV at some point a few years back. I'm now having deep heat projectors, so there is some natural progress, and I think that is completely normal and encouraged in the reptile world. I think the saddest thing is when someone has said, okay, well, leopard geckos need to live in sterile tubs. I've done it for 20 years, I'm going to continue doing it for 20 years. We don't need that attitude in the reptile world. Like, you need to move with the times. And I also wanted to do this video just to show you that how you might begin life with your gecko. Like, you might actually want to start with more of a sterile setup. It doesn't mean you have to stick with that its entire life. As I said in a previous video, as your confidence as an owner grows and your ability to build these tanks grow, you may see a change in your setups, and that, as I said, is very much encouraged and perfectly normal to gradually change things over time. But yeah, so this has been quite a rambly video. I wanted to say a massive thank you to people who actually recommended the reptile and amphibian bioactive setups and the bioactive leopard gecko groups on Facebook. I recently joined them and I've been so inspired. There's a wealth of information over there. I'm just absorbing it all in. And if you are interested, I would recommend checking those two groups out. But yeah, I hope you found this video interesting. If you haven't already, please subscribe. But thank you for watching, guys, and goodbye.